guys, welcome back, and today we are going to be reading Harry Potter and the Stone by J.K. Rowling, Chapter 3. Let's go. So, I'm going to show you, if you haven't read my other first two videos, Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, I would recommend going to see those before you watch this one. But, rundown of it, we have the Harry Potter Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling and the other Harry Potter books. And we are going to sing The Letters from No One. The escape of the Brazilian boa constructor earned Harry his longest ever punishment. By the time he was allowed out of the cupboard again, summer holidays had started, and Dudley had already broken his new video camera, crashed his remote control airplane, and the first time out on his racing bike knocked down old Mrs. Fig as she crossed Pivot Drive on her crutches. Harry was glad school was over, but there was no escaping Dudley's gang, who visited the house every single day. Pierce, Dennis, Malcolm, and Gordon were all big and stupid, but as Dudley was the biggest and stupidest of the lot, he was the leader. The rest of them were quite happy to join in Dudley's favorite sport, Harry hunt. This is why Harry spent so much time responsible out of the house, wandering around and thinking about the end of the holidays, where he could see a tiny ray of hope. When September came, he'd be off to secondary school, and for the first time in his life, he wouldn't be with Dudley. Dudley had been accepted in Uncle Vernon's old private school, Smeltings. Piers Polkiss was going there too. Harry, on the other hand, was going to Stonewall High, the local public school. Dudley thought this was very funny. They stuffed people's heads down the toilet the first day at Stonewall, he told Harry. Want to come upstairs and practice? No thanks, said Harry. The poor toilets never had anything as horrible as your head down it. It might be sick. Then he ran before Dudley could work out what he said. One day in July, Aunt Peruna took Dudley to London to buy Smelting's uniform, leaving Harry at Mrs. Fig's. Mrs. Fig wasn't as bad as usual. It turned out she'd broken her leg tripping over one of her cats. Didn't seem quite fond of them as before. She let Harry watch television and gave him a bit of chocolate cake that tasted like he'd had it for several years. That evening, Dudley paraded around the living room for the family in his brand new uniform. Smelting boys wore maroon tailcoats, orange knickerbockers, and flat straw hats called boaters. They also carried knobby sticks used for hitting each other while the teachers weren't looking. This was supposed to be good training for later life. As they looked at Dudley in his new knickerbottoms, Uncle Vernon nodded and said Not gruffly, said gruffly that this was the most proudest moment of his life. Aunt Peruna burst into tears as she couldn't believe it was her Ickle Duncans. He looked so handsome and grown up. Harry didn't trust himself to speak. He thought two of his ribs might already have been cracked from him trying to not laugh. There was a horrible smell in the kitchen the next morning when Harry went in for breakfast. It seemed to be a large metal tub in the sink. Went to have a look, and the tub was full of what looked like bags of gray water. "What's this?" she asked his Aunt Pearl. Her lips tightened as they always did if he dared to ask a question. "New school uniform." Harry looked at the bowl again. "Oh," he said, "I didn't realize it had to be so wet." "Don't be stupid," snapped Aunt Peruna. "I'm dyeing one of Dudley's old things gray for you so it'll look just like everybody else's when I'm finished." Harry seriously doubted this, but it's best not to argue. He sat down at the table, tried to not think about how he was going to look on his first day at Stonewall High. Like he was wearing bits of old elephant skin, probably. Dudley and Uncle Vernon came in, both with wrinkled noses because of the smell from Harry's new. Uncle Vernon opened his newspaper as usual. Dudley banged his smelting stick wherever he carried it on the table. They heard the click of the mail slot and flop of letters on the doormat. "Get the mail, Dudley," said Uncle Vernon from behind the paper. "Make Harry get it." "Get the mail, Harry." "Make Dudley get it." "Poke him with your smelting stick, Dudley." Okay. Harry dodged the smelting stick and went to get the mail. 3 things lay on the doormat. Postcard from Uncle Vernon's sister, Marge, who is vacationing on the Isle of Wight. A brown envelope that looked like a bill, and a letter for Harry. Harry picked it up and stared at it, his whole life twinkling in a giant elastic band. No one ever in his whole life had written to him. Who would? He had no friends, no other relatives. He didn't belong to the library, so he couldn't have got any rude notes saying for books back yet. It was a letter addressed so plainly there could be no mistake. Mr. H. Potter, the cupboard under the stairs, Pivot Drive, Little Whining Survey. Envelope was thick and heavy, made out of yellow parchment paper, and the address written in emerald green ink. There was no stamp. Turning the envelope over in his hand, over his hand trembling, Harry saw a purple wax seal bearing coat of arms, a lion, a eagle, a badger, and a snake surrounding a large letter H. "Hurry up, boy!" shouted Uncle Vernon from the kitchen. "What are you doing, checking for letter bombs?" He chuckled at his own joke. Harry went back into the kitchen, still staring at his letter. He handed Uncle Vernon the bill, the postcard, sat down, and slowly began to open the yellow envelope. Uncle Vernon ripped open the bill, snorted in disgust, and flipped over the postcard. "Marge is ill," he informed Aunt Petunia. Made a funny welk. "Dad! Dad!" Dudley said suddenly. "Harry's got something." "Dad!" said Dudley suddenly. "Dad, Harry's got something." Harry was on the point of unfolding his letter which was written on the same heavy parchment paper as the envelope, when it was jerked sharply out of his hand by Uncle Vernon. "That's mine," said Harry, trying to snatch it back. "Who'd be writing to you?" sneered Uncle Vernon, taking the letter open with one hand and glancing at it. His face went from red to green faster than a set of traffic lights. Didn't stop there. Within seconds, it was grayish white of old porridge. "Petunia?" he gasped. Dudley tried to grab the letter, read it, but Uncle Vernon held it high out of his reach, and Aunt Petunia looked at it curiously and read the first line. For a moment it looked as though she might faint, clutched her throat, made a choking noise. "Vernon! Oh my goodness, Vernon!" They stared at each other, seeming to have forgotten Harry and Dudley were still in the room. Dudley wasn't used to being ignored. He gave his father a sharp tap on the head with his melting stick. "I want to read that letter." "I want to read it," said Harry fiercely, "as it's mine." "Get out, both of you," croaked Uncle Vernon, stuffing the letter back inside his envelope. Harry didn't move. "I want my letter," he shouted. "Let me see it," demanded Dudley. "Out!" roared Uncle Vernon, and he took both Harry and Dudley by the scuffs of their neck and threw them into the hall, slamming the kitchen door behind them. Harry and Dudley only had a furious but silent fight over who would listen at the keyhole. Dudley wanted Harry, with his glasses dangling from the ear, lay flat on his stomach to listen through the crack between the door and the floor. "Vernon," Uncle Patricia said in a quivering voice, "look at the address. How could they possibly know where he sleeps? You don't think they're watching the house, spying, might be following us?" Murdered Uncle Vernon wildly. "But what should we do, Vernon? Should we write back? Tell them we don't want?" Harry could see Uncle Vernon's shiny black shoes pacing up and down the kitchen. "No," he said finally. "No, we'll ignore it. And if they don't get an answer, yes, that's best. They won't do anything." "But I'm not having one in the house, Petunia. Didn't we swear when we took him in we'd stamp out that dangerous nonsense?" That evening, when we got back from work, Uncle Vernon did something he'd never done before. He visited Harry in his cupboard. "Where's my letter?" said Harry the moment Uncle Vernon had squeezed through the door. "Who's writing me?" "No, and it was addressed to you by mistake," said Uncle Vernon shortly. I have burned it. It was not a mistake, said Harry angrily. It had my cupboard on it. Silence! Yelled Uncle Vernon with a couple of strides fell from the ceiling. He took a few deep breaths and then forced his face into a smile and looked quite painful. Harry, yes, about this cupboard. Your aunt and I have been thinking you're really getting too big for it. We think it would be nice if you moved into Dudley's second bedroom. Why, said Harry. Don't ask any questions, snapped his uncle. Take this stuff upstairs now. The Dursleys' home had 4 bedrooms, one for Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia, one for visitors, usually Uncle Vernon's sister Marge, one for where Dudley slept, and one where Dudley kept all the toys and things that wouldn't fit in his first bedroom. It only took Harry one trip upstairs to move everything he owned from the cupboard to his room. He sat down on the bed and stared around him, and nearly everything in here was broken. The month-old video camera was laying on top of a small working tank Dudley had once driven over the next door neighbor's dog. In the corner was Dudley's first ever television set, which he'd put his foot through when his favorite program had been canceled. There was a large bird cage which had once held a parrot that Dudley had swapped at school for a real air rifle, which was up on a shelf with the end of all bent because Dudley had sat on it. The other shelves were full of books. They were only things in the room that looked as though they'd never been touched. From downstairs came the sound of Dudley bawling as at his mother. I don't want him in there. I need that room. Make him get out. Harry sighed and stretched onto the bed. Yesterday he'd given anything to be up here. Today he'd rather be back in his cupboard with that letter than up here without it. Next morning at breakfast, everyone was rather quiet. Dudley was in shock. He screamed, whacked his father with his melting stick, been sick on purpose, kicked his mother, thrown his tortoise through the greenhouse roof, and still didn't have his room back. Harry was thinking about the time yesterday and bitterly wishing he'd opened the letter. In the hall, Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia kept looking at each other darkly when the mail arrived. Uncle Vernon, who seemed to be trying to be nice to Harry, made Dudley go and get it. They heard him banging things with his melting stick all the way down the hall and shouted, There's another one! Mr. H. Potter, the smallest bedroom, 4 Pivot Drive. With a strangled cry, Uncle Vernon leapt from his seat and ran down the hall, and Harry right behind him. Uncle Vernon had to wrestle Dudley to the ground to get that letter from him, which was difficult by the fact Harry had grabbed Uncle Vernon around the neck from behind. After a minute of confused fighting in which everyone got hit a lot by the smelting stick, Uncle Vernon straightened up, gasping for breath with Harry's letter clutched in his hand. Go to your cupboard, your bedroom. He wheezed at Harry. Dudley, go, just go. Harry walked round and round in his new room. Someone knew he had moved out of his cupboard, and they seemed to know he hadn't received his first letter. Surely That meant they'd try again, and this time he'd make sure that they didn't fall. Make sure they didn't fall. He had a plan. The repaired alarm clock rang at 6 o'clock, and the next morning Harry turned it off quickly, dressed silently, and wasn't awake. The Dursleys, he stole downstairs without turning on any of the lights. He was going to wait for the postman. Wait. Oh, he mustn't waken the Dursleys. He stole downstairs without turning on any of the lights. He was going to wait for the postman on the corner of Pivot Drive and get the letters for number 4 first. His heart hammered as he crept across the dark hall towards the front door. Arg! Harry leapt to the air, trotted on something big and squishy on the doormat. Something alive. Lights clicked on upstairs. To his horror, Harry realized the big squishy thing had been his uncle's face. Uncle Vernon had been lying at the foot of the front door in a sleeping bag, clearly making sure that Harry didn't do exactly what he had been trying to do. He shouted at Harry for about half an hour, then told him to go and make a cup of tea. Harry shuffled miserably off into the kitchen, and by the time Mary arrived right into Uncle Vernon's lap, Harry could see 3 letters addressed in white ink. I want. He began, but Uncle Vernon was tearing the letters into pieces before his eyes. Uncle Vernon didn't go to work that day. He stayed home and nailed the mail slot up. See, he explained to Aunt Petunia, if they can't deliver it, they'll just give up. Not sure that'll work, Vernon. Not like you and me. Petunia, they're always not like you and me. Oh no, it says I'm not sure that'll work, Vernon. Oh, these people's minds work in strange ways, Petunia. They are not like you and me, said Uncle Vernon, trying to knock in a nail with the piece of fruit cake that Petunia had brought him. On Friday, no less than 12 letters arrived for Harry. As they couldn't go through the mail slot, they had been pushed under the door, slotted into the slides. A few even forced through a small window in the downstairs bathroom. Uncle Vernon stayed home again. After burning all the letters, he got out a hammer and nails, boarded up the cracks around the front and back door so no one could go out. He hummed Tiptoe Through the Tulips as he worked and jumped at long noises. On Saturday, things began to get out of hand. 24 letters to Harry found their way into the house, rolled up and hidden inside each of 2 dozen eggs. And their very confused milkman. Their very confused milkman had handed Aunt Petunia furious telephone calls to the post office and and the dairy trying to find someone to complain to. Aunt Petunia shredded the letters in the food processor. Who on earth wants to talk to you this bad, Dudley asked Harry in amazement. On Sunday morning, Uncle Vernon sat down on the breakfast table looking tired and rather ill, but happy. No post on Sundays, he reminded them cheerfully as they came, something whizzing down. No, cheerfully as he spread marmalade on his newspapers. No letters today. Something came whizzing down the kitchen chimney as spoke and caught him sharply on the back of the head. The next moment, 30 or 40 letters came pelting out of the fireplace like bullets. The Dursleys ducked, but Harry leapt into the air, trying to catch one. Ow! Ow! Uncle Vernon seized Harry around the waist and threw him into the hall. Aunt Petunia and Dudley had run out with their arms over their faces. Uncle Vernon slammed the door shut. They could still hear the letters screaming into the room, bouncing off the walls and floor. That does it, said Uncle Vernon, trying to speak calmly, but pulling off great tufts of his mustache at the same time. You all back here in 5 minutes, ready to leave. We're going away. Just pass the clothes. No arguments. He looked so dangerous with half his mustache missing that no one dared to argue. 10 minutes later, they had rinsed their way through the boarded doors and were in the car, speeding towards the highway. Dudley was sniffling in the back seat. His father had hit him round the head for holding them up while trying to pack his television, VCR, and computer in his sports bag. They drove and they drove. Even Petunia didn't dare to ask where they were going. Every now and then Uncle Vernon would take a sharp turn and drive in the opposite direction for a while. Shake them off, he would mutter whenever he did this. They didn't stop to drink or eat all day. By nightfall, Dudley was howling. He never had such a bad day in his life. He was so hungry. He missed 5 television programs he wanted to see. He'd never gone so long without blowing up an alien on his computer. Uncle Vernon stopped at last outside a gloomy looking hotel on the outskirts of a big city. Dudley and Harry shared a room with twin beds and damp, musty sheets. Harry snored, but Harry stayed awake. Dudley snored, but Harry stayed awake, sitting on the windowsill, staring at the lights of passing cars and wondering. They ate stale cornflakes and cold canned tomatoes on toast breakfast the next day. They had just finished when the owner of the hotel came by their table. Excuse me, but is one of you Mr. H. Potter? Only I got about 100 of these at the front desk. She held up a letter so they could read the green ink address. Harry made a grab for the letter, but Uncle Vernon knocked his hand out the way. The woman said, "I'll take them," said Uncle Vernon, staring quickly and folding low from her and following her from the dining table. "Wouldn't it be better just to go home, dears?" "Dear," said Aunt Peruna, suggested timidly. Hours later, Uncle Vernon didn't seem to her exactly what he was looking for. None of them. He drove them into the middle of a forest, got out, looked around. He shook his head, got back in the car, and off again, and off they went again. The same thing happened in the middle of a plowed field, halfway across a suspension bridge at the top of a Middle Eve parking garage. "Daddy's gone mad, hasn't he?" Dudley asked Aunt Peruna. Dully late that afternoon, Uncle Vernon had parked at the coast, locked them inside the car, and disappeared. Started to rain. Great drops beat on the roof of the floor. Dudley sniffled. "It's Monday," told his mother. "The great Homebo's on tonight. I want to stay somewhere with the television." Monday. This reminded Harry of something. It was Monday. You could usually count on Dudley and other days of the week because of television. Then tomorrow was Tuesday. Tuesday was Harry's 11th birthday. Of course, birthdays were never exactly fun. Last year, the Dudleys had given him a coat hanger and a pair of Uncle Vernon's old socks. Still, you weren't 11 every day. Uncle Vernon was back and he was smiling, still carrying a long thin package. Didn't answer Petunia when she asked what he'd found. "Found the perfect place. Come on, everyone out." It was cold outside the cart, and Uncle Vernon, pointing at what looked large rock out at the sea, perched at the rock at the most miserable little shack you could imagine. One thing was certain: there was no television in there. "Storm forecast for tonight," said Uncle Vernon, gleefully clapping his hands together. "And this gentleman kindly agreed to lend us his boat." A toothless old man came ambling up to them, pointing with a rather wicked grin at an old rowboat bobbling in the iron green water below them. "I've already got some rations," said Uncle Vernon, "so all aboard." It was freezing in the boat. Icy sea spray and rain crept down their necks, and a chilly wind whipped their faces, and rain crept down their necks. Oh no. It was freezing in the boat. Icy sea spray and rain crept down their necks, and a chilly wind whipped their faces. After what seemed like hours, they reached the rock where Uncle Vernon, slipping and sliding, led the way to the broken down house. Inside was horrible. It smelled strongly of seaweed. The wind whistled through the gaps in the wooden walls, and the fireplace was damp and empty. There were only 2 rooms. Uncle Vernon rations turned out to be a bag of chips each and 4 bananas. He tried to start a fire, but the empty chip bags just smoked and shriveled up. "Could we do something with those letters now, eh?" he said cheerfully. He was in a very good mood. Obviously, he thought nobody stood chance of reaching them here in the storm to deliver mail. Harry privately agreed, though the thought didn't cheer him up at all. As the night fell, the promised storm blew up around them. Spray from high waves splattered the walls of the hut, and fierce wind rattled the filthy windows. Aunt Peruna found a few moldy blankets in the second room and made up a bed for Dudley on the moth-eaten sofa. He and Uncle Vernon went off to the lumpy bed next door, and Harry was left to find the softest bit of floor he could and to curl up under the thinnest, most padded blanket. The storm raged more and furiously as the night went on. Harry couldn't sleep. He shivered and turned over, trying to get on. Harry couldn't sleep. He shivered and turned over. Turned over, trying to get comfortable. His stomach grumbling with hunger. Dudley's snores were drowned by the low rolls of thunder, which started near midnight. The lighted dial of Dudley's watch, which was dangling over the edge of the sofa on his fat wrist, told Harry he'd be 11 in 10 minutes. He lay and watched his birthday tick nearer, wondering if the Dursleys would remember at all, wondering where the letters writer was now. 5 minutes later, Harry heard something creak outside and hoped the roof wasn't going to fall in, although he might be warmer if it did. 4 minutes to go. Maybe the house in Pivot Drive would be so full of letters when they got back that he'd be able to steal one somehow. 3 minutes to go. Was that the sea slamming hard on the rock like that? And 2 minutes to go. What was that funny crunching noise? Was the rock crumbling into the sea? 1 minute to go and he'd be 11. 30 seconds, 20, 10, 9. Maybe he'd wake Dudley up just to annoy him. 3, 2, 1. Boom! The whole shack shivered and Harry sat bolt right up, staring at the door. Someone was outside knocking to come in. Okay, guys, well, I will see you next time, and we will read Keeper of the Keys. Chapter 4. Have a good day. See you next time. Bye.